Hello fellow seekers, welcome back to my channel. This is Amanda, Artemis of Forrester, Rune Reader, Diviner, and Polytheist Mystic. I know I've been kind of absent of late, and I did promise you a lot of videos, and I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, but I do struggle with a lot of depression and anxiety, and it's not been an easy month for me. So I'm not going to get into why, because nobody needs to hear that, but I'm trying to bounce back from a rough episode. But I decided I'm going to start working on the empath videos, which, and I did say videos, because as I was working on scripting out what I want to talk about, it's pretty clear that the empath stuff is going to take more than one video. And I was hoping it would just be one, but there's kind of a lot to cover. And if you look at other parts of YouTube, you'll see that there are people with entire channels dedicated to this. And I don't want the empath subject to kind of take over this channel. I'm sorry that this is a little off center, but it's really sunny out, and I don't want that to screw up the lighting of the video. So it's gonna be a little bit off center, and that's kind of messing with my OCD just a little bit. Hopefully that's not too annoying. Alright, so empath. I haven't found a perfect definition of an empath. The best definition is someone who senses the feelings of someone else, the emotions of other people, and energy, not just, especially from other people, but usually energy. You can usually walk. An example would be walking into a room where somebody had just had an argument, and you can feel like a very dense, heavy energy. Another example, something that's happened in my life, was I went to work before and I was feeling perfectly fine. I had my shields up, but there must have been a chink or something. As soon as I got to work, I had a headache, and it wasn't noisy. There wasn't anything that would have triggered it. But then I was talking to the coworker in my department, and she had a headache. So I picked up on her headache, and it was in the same place too. So she had a headache right behind her eyes, right up here, and I had just picked up on her physical headache right away. And so that's one of the not so fun things about being an empath, is sometimes you can pick up on physical symptoms like that. Some people have different, I was going to say abilities, but I suppose different types of empathic abilities, yeah. Some people are actually much more attuned to animals. There are animal empaths who really strongly pick up on an animal's nature, and other people are more attuned to humans. And it can be a good thing, and it can be very, very difficult. In fact, as I was working on this is basically going to be more of a definition and introduction video, and also talk a little bit about highly sensitive person. I'm really probably not even going to get into self-care, because the list of my notes for self-care is really going to go over, and that's going to have to be another video. So this is going to be an empath series, probably 2 or 3 different videos. So an empath is someone who's picking up on the energy around them, especially the emotions of other people. And that's mostly how I'm going to approach it, because that's how I've experienced it. Pretty much every empath that I've known does have a connection to animals. But some people, that connection is just much deeper, you know? So that's why I'm pointing out that there are different types of empath. And so sometimes these different abilities do overlap. Some people don't get the physical manifestations like I do. I very much get the physical manifestations of the headaches or stomach aches. Although I feel stomach aches for almost any bad almost any bad energy manifests in my stomach, and that's because of my solar plexus. And apparently that's pretty common for empaths. Will feel a lot of energy through their solar plexus and their sacral chakra. So, as I said in one of my earlier videos, I've been working with my sacral and my solar plexus chakra a lot in the last year and a half, and that's part of why. So, through the research I've been doing in the last couple years, that's actually pretty common for empaths, is to have issues with those two chakras. So, that might be something that you want to be aware of if you think you might be an empath, is to work with those in particular. So empaths obviously comes from empathy, which everybody has empathy. That's important to understand, unless you're like a complete sociopath, it does exist. Empathy is the ability to feel for someone else, to put yourself in their shoes, and to I don't want to say feel sorry for, because that's pity is different, but it's to feel for someone else, to feel empathy for someone else. You know what I mean. It's to put yourself in someone's shoes and imagine what they're going through. That's what I'm looking for. And so everybody has empathy, but empaths take that to another level, to where they're not just imagining it, but they can actually feel that person's emotions before they even say it. They don't need to imagine putting themselves in that person's shoes. They can often be hit by a wave of emotion before they know the source of the emotion, which is why crowds are often very, very difficult for an empath. Now, retail. Working in offices, I'm sure, I've never worked in an office, like a corporation type office, but I'm sure that also has its own challenges. But with retail, that has been my experience. You get customers coming in, coming out, coming in, coming out, coming in, coming out. And so that energy is constantly shifting all day long. You can get a shot of really positive energy from some really friendly, awesome, good people, and you feel really, really upbeat. And then you get these really, really depressed people who are really, really sad. And if your shields aren't up, and if you're not used to dealing with this, and if you don't know what's going on, that transfers to you. And that's not even counting the angry people who may or may not be screaming at you. Or let's say you're like 3 or 4 aisles over and they're screaming at a coworker, and then you feel both the anger of the customer and your poor beaten down coworker. For an untrained empath, that is an extremely confusing situation to be in. So I hope that I'm conveying this properly, but someone who hasn't had these experiences, probably this video isn't for you anyway. If you're wondering if you're an empath, you probably are, because you're probably connecting with some of this. But what I'm about to talk about is something in the scientific community, which is actually, I don't like using the term legitimate, but it has been legitimized by psychologists, called a highly sensitive person, an HSP. This is not the same thing as an empath. Sometimes it does overlap. See, I've met extremely powerful empaths, and I actually think I'm a little middling as an empath. I know I'm an empath. For me, it overlaps, and I think I lean slightly more towards highly sensitive person, and I think I'm a little middling as an empath. But, you know, it's a little different for everybody. An HSP is, if you look at the description, it's almost like an HSP is the scientific definition of empath. So you would think, well, they're highly sensitive. They feel very deeply. They feel emotions. They're very sensitive to other people's emotions. They catch on. They can see like micro expressions. This is all like scientific definitions, so I'll be using stuff like that. They can see like micro expressions that other people won't pick up on, so they'll pick up on other people's feelings that way. And it's really important to them to make peace with other people, and sometimes they can be submissive throughout their life if they are not, if they don't, because peace is just so important to them. They do not like conflict. It can take a while to learn to set your boundaries. Solar plexus, boundaries. And I'm 32 and I am still working on this. I am still working on healing some of my issues, you know, but it's a lifelong process, and as long as you are committed to being better, that's what's important. So, and their emotions obviously can be high and low. So it looks from the outside as if a highly sensitive person, an HSP, is the same thing as an empath, but it's just the scientific term for it, right? Well, actually, what it really is an empath is picking up on other people's emotions or on emotions in the room, but an HSP is responding to their own nervous system, to their own perceptions of the room. And that's a very important difference, because if they think that they are an empath, and they go somewhere and they're triggered by something from their past, let's say, and they have this flood of negative emotion, like just outright fear. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter why they're afraid. But they have this flood of outright fear, right? It's very easy for them to think that the world is an extremely hostile, scary, screwed up place, right? Because they think they're sensing all this hostility from out there. But what they're really responding to is their own overactive nervous system. They're not actually sensing anything. And as you can see, it can be very, very important to figure out which one you are. And as you can also imagine, it's extremely complicated if you happen to overlap. And I do. Yay me! I have an anxiety disorder and I'm also an empath. Fun! So that's where the challenge of trying to figure out what's intuition and what is my panic disorder, just panicking because it wants to panic. It's important to know that these coping mechanisms, because they are coping mechanisms, are there for a reason, because at one point it did keep you alive, and that is why we evolved them. Even if it didn't keep you alive from even if you've had no traumatic experiences that you would think are traumatic, the reason you genetically have an anxiety disorder is because your ancestors, who panicked more easily than your ancestors that didn't, were less likely to get eaten by a tiger. And so they passed on your panicky genes. Thank you, ancestors. It's so much fun. But hey, you're alive, right? They're alive, you're alive. And so now you panic at everything. Fun! So, I hope that is the basic difference between an empath and an HSP, and hopefully you can see that. The overlap is a little, yeah, like I said, fun. But basically, it's something that comes with time, and you've got to just learn to know yourself. The first Delphic maxim, carved in the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. As Socrates said, know thyself. That is the beginning of all wisdom. And it's something that our society, again, I'm going to harp on this a lot, we don't like to do that. We like to bury our pain under alcohol and sex and food and video games even, and TV and whatever else, and just pretend that everything is A-okay. But the only way our life is going to get better is if we acknowledge our pain, feel it, this is Scorpio season, so this is the time to acknowledge our pain, feel it, transform, and move forward. It is so not fun. That is why I haven't been making videos the last few weeks. I've been a mess. But I'm in the middle of transformation. So, yay. Maybe we'll look back on these videos in a few years and not even recognize me. That would be interesting. So, I feel like there was more that I wanted to say, and I can't think of it. So I guess that this one was supposed to be shorter. Like I said, I'm going to do a whole series on empaths. So I guess that this is just going to be a short and sweet one, just a little introduction to empaths versus HSPs. I also want to talk about it a little bit more from a polytheist perspective, because none of the videos on here, they come from a very new agey, everything is all one perspective. And I am eventually going to recommend a few YouTubers that I actually really enjoy and like, but not until I get a few more videos with my perspective out there, because as with like Stargirl and some other ones I've recommended, they have a lot of good stuff, but also stuff that I disagree with. So I want to lay down where I think they're wrong and where I think they're right, which is what's really cool about YouTube, and how we can actually get a really cool dialogue and discussion going. So I guess that's all I have to say on this subject today. But if anyone is interested, tomorrow, tomorrow, the 3rd, November 3rd, I will be reading runes at Mystic Beads and Nursewear in Niles at 1 to 5 p.m. So if anyone's interested in seeing what I do, come on down if you're in the Michiana area, and come hang out. You can ask me any questions about empaths or runes or paganism, polytheism, any of this. As long as I'm not giving a reading, I am cool to just hang out and chat. I just want to meet like-minded people. So I hope everyone had a good Samhain, good Day of the Dead, good whatever you celebrate. Happy Halloween.